Hi, it's Katrina. The Antarctic fossil rainforest. The frigid continent of Antarctica was once just as hot as Italy is today. We know this because of a fossil rainforest discovered in Antarctica. These days, the average temperature at the South Pole is 78 degrees Fahrenheit below zero. 90 million years before today, the temperature could soar to over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a difference of almost 200 degrees. According to marine geologist Johann P. Klages, one of the scientists responsible for unearthing the fossils in Antarctica, 90 million years ago was the last time the continent was completely covered with vegetation. He also says Antarctica was probably home to a rich biodiversity of animal life, including dinosaurs. The fossils Johann and his team discovered weren't actually found on the continent, but at the bottom of the sea floor back in 2017. They found fossilized tree roots that date to the Cretaceous period. And not that long ago, a research team from Brazil uncovered pieces of charcoal dating back 75 million years. The charcoal almost definitely came from an ancient fire that engulfed the rainforest in Antarctica. What this means is that something major happened that caused Antarctica to basically burst into flame. And according to these scientists, the climate can and almost certainly will shift again sometime in the future, so that Antarctica is once more as hot and as tropical as the Amazon rainforest. UFO over the South Pole. In 2012, aliens were spotted hovering over Antarctica. A mysterious, unidentified flying object was captured on video floating over the Neumayer Station 3. The object is blurry in the footage, so it could technically be anything. UFO buffs swear it was an alien ship. Fast forward a decade, we still don't have any answers for what this mysterious thing was hovering over Antarctica. What we know is that the object appeared directly above the research station. It looked perfectly round, and it seemed to be about the size of a balloon. Not a birthday balloon, but a large weather balloon. Now, everyone has heard the weather balloon excuse before, and so this doesn't sit right with some people. After all, what in the world was a weather balloon doing so far south, lingering over a research station where tests and experiments are carried out for things like meteorology and atmospheric chemistry? It doesn't make any sense. Plus, the object appeared in frame only for a handful of seconds. Whatever this thing was, it appears to have come down from the sky, paused momentarily above the research station, and then took off again. This isn't the kind of behavior we'd expect to see with a weather balloon. We don't really know if this was proof of aliens in Antarctica, but it's definitely mysterious. All these years later, most people have forgotten all about it, and so the investigation is pretty much closed. Antarctic jellies. An Australian research crew spent 2018 and 2019 studying the waters of Antarctica. Researcher Emiliano Cimoli from the University of Tasmania put together a short video to show what the scientists discovered. The film is about 7 minutes long, and it shows some of the strange yet beautiful creatures the scientists found flourishing in the icy water just below Antarctica's ice. One part of this study involved examining algae which lives underneath the ice, clinging to it like a mold. They say this mold-like growth is an intricate part of the food chain and helps to feed lots of the other creatures living here. By far, one of the coolest animals they focused on is a jellyfish called a sea angel. Scientists have described it as a tiny wing-flapping jelly that looks like a feather brought to life. There are various jellies underneath Antarctica's ice, but these ones are particularly fascinating. They have small orange crustaceans living on their bodies that act as parasites, easily viewable since the jellies have translucent bodies. You can even see the last meal sitting in the jelly's belly thanks to its nearly invisible skin. While most people may think Antarctica is a wasteland populated by nothing but penguins, it's actually teeming with life, especially the waters. These fantastic jellyfish are only one part of the ecosystem, which consists of hundreds of other strange and mesmerizing creatures. Mysterious cave. Thanks to Google Maps, a mysterious and unexplained cave was discovered on a remote island in Antarctica. Some wild claims have come up surrounding this bizarre cave, with some people saying it could be the entrance to Hollow Earth. Some call it a military cover-up, and some even say it might have something to do with aliens. What we know about the cave is that it first appeared on Google Maps in 2007, and then was gone 6 months later. At least this is according to the Google enthusiasts who have been busy tracking the phenomenon. The cave can be found on Greenwich Island, located in the south of Antarctica. While no trace of it appears to be left today, it was still definitely there in 2007. The big question is why the massive opening into the earth suddenly vanished after people found it and started talking about it online. And of course, the question as to what was hiding at the bottom of that cave. One of the prevailing theories is that the cave is a secret entrance to Hollow Earth. Hollow Earth is a fringe conspiracy theory which says underneath the surface of the planet is a secondary landscape, a massive land with its own atmosphere, with towering mountains and strange monsters. This place is only accessible through massive caves leading down hundreds of miles into the ground. Nobody has ever been able to prove it, and pretty much every major scientist says it's nothing but science fiction. In truth, the cave probably vanished from Google Maps because it collapsed or was frozen over with ice. In the end, unless you see it with your own eyes, you just can't know for sure. It's shout-out time! I wanted to say a big thank you to Floyd Reeby and Mike Mueller for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. Subglacial Lake. Lake Snow Eagle is a newly discovered subglacial lake hiding underneath Antarctica. By subglacial, I mean the lake is buried underneath glacial ice. From one side to the other, the lake is about 26 miles long, making it one of the biggest of its kind on the continent. It's hiding inside a canyon in East Antarctica, covered and invisible from above by an insanely thick ice sheet. The only way to discover this kind of thing is by using advanced research equipment. Scientists had to use a polar research aircraft equipped with the latest tools to identify the lake under the ice. What's interesting is that it's only a couple hundred miles from the coast, and this has given the scientists an idea. They think that because it's so close to the sea, the mysterious lake could contain information as to how the ice sheet formed in the first place. The lake is about 34 million years old. Because of that, it almost certainly contains geological evidence of Antarctica's past. Dr. Don Blankenship from the Institute for Geophysics at the University of Texas says that as of now, researchers know that something changed with the ice sheet 10,000 years ago. They don't know what or why. As they dig deeper into the subglacial lake, they are hoping to uncover secrets of Antarctica's past. Sediment at the bottom of the lake should yield clues as to every little thing that's happened on the continent for the last tens of millions of years. Fresh plastic. In a shocking and hardly believable first, scientists have discovered microplastics in fresh Antarctic snow. Fresh means snow that has recently fallen from the sky. In other words, scientists have found snow infused with plastic particles beginning to blanket Antarctica. It shows just how extensive global plastic pollution is, seeing as it's already in the water cycle and coming down in Antarctica in snowflakes. The research was done by scientists at the University of Canterbury in New Zealand. They looked at snow samples from 19 different places across the Ross ice shelf. When they looked at these samples, they found plastic particles, specifically the kind of plastic that can be found everywhere on Earth in clothes and water bottles. But here's what's even more disturbing. The study found that 29 particles per liter of melted snow are made of plastic. That's even higher than concentrations in the water around Antarctica. That means there's a higher concentration of plastic up in the clouds than in the ocean. The find was pretty depressing to the scientists, who traveled to Antarctica in 2019, optimistic there would be no microplastics in such a remote place. Sadly, they were completely wrong. Monstrous birds. 50 million years ago, there was a bird that looked kind of like an albatross. Only for a mouth, this bird had a hacksaw. It also had a wingspan of about 21 feet. It was bigger than a car and was probably one of the largest birds to ever take to the skies. This beast belonged to a family of ancient avian animals called pelagornithid. And to give you an example of just how big they were, they absolutely dwarfed the largest bird alive right now by wingspan, the albatross, with a measly 11.5 feet. Evidence of this monstrosity has been found in Antarctica. Researchers came across a portion of a bird's fossilized foot from 50 million years ago. It's amazing because it shows that after the extinction of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago, birds bounced back in a big way. The dinosaurs were dead, and the world was ruled by dragon-like birds. And apparently, they like to hang out in Antarctica. This discovery was also pretty fascinating because it proved to be the oldest pelagornithid bone ever uncovered, over 10 million years older than a jawbone from 40 million years ago. And that's not the only crazy thing, because the last known pelagornithid only died a brief 2.5 million years ago, right around the time revolving ice ages started. This huge, bony-toothed bird could have been living in Antarctica even after the legendary megalodon went extinct. The wreckage of the Endurance. 2 miles beneath the water in the Weddell Sea, not far from the mainland of Antarctica, Ernest Shackleton's legendary vessel, the Endurance, has been found. It's sitting on the Antarctic sea floor, almost 10,000 feet below, since it was last seen in 1915. That was when Shackleton, an Irish-British explorer, watched with his crew of 27 men as their ship sank into the chaotic depths of the ocean. Their mission had been to reach the South Pole by traveling through uncharted territory in eastern Antarctica. Shackleton proved too reckless, too obsessed with getting to the South Pole, and so he ignored the warnings of local whalers. They told him not to go in 1914 because of poor ice conditions. Shackleton thought he knew better than the experienced whalers, and his ship ended up sinking. Still, Shackleton proved to be a most resilient leader. He led his stranded men to Elephant Island, where they set up camp in the snow. He then took 5 of his men and embarked on a journey across 800 miles of freezing water to reach South Georgia Island. And once there, he recruited help to go back and pick up the rest of the crew. All these years later, the Endurance has finally been uncovered, documented, and photographed. A team of researchers traveled on the South African icebreaker S.A. Agulhas II, searched for 2 weeks, then used submersible crafts to scan the sea floor. Finally, they came across the legendary vessel, and because of the cold Antarctic temperatures, the Endurance looks exactly the same as it did when it sank over a century ago. Unknown life. A series of mysterious caves have been discovered in Antarctica. Scientists say the caves are warm enough that they could support plant and animal species, but nobody knows just yet. The issue is that Australian scientists from Australian National University found the caves hidden underneath the icy surface of Antarctica, but they haven't been able to look inside them. The caves have been created by steam leaking out from Mount Erebus, potentially one of the most dangerous volcanoes in Antarctica. This steam has made a kind of labyrinth of tunnels and caverns underneath the ice, and has also helped to keep it warm inside. Believe it or not, these Antarctic caves can reach temperatures of 77 degrees Fahrenheit. There is also quite a bit of light filtering through the ice, which could help plants to grow. In all likelihood, the life forms living in these caves are things like moss and algae, but there could be small invertebrates as well. Maybe some really small bugs or tiny living organisms. Researchers won't know until they can physically search the caves and look for potential life forms. Ship in the ice. In 1985, the Soviet Union dispatched a giant icebreaker to Antarctica. They did this because one of their research vessels had gotten trapped in the thick ice with 53 people on board. The vessel got stuck in 12 feet of thick, nearly indestructible ice. Those 53 men were stuck in the polar nights with bitter frost in their lungs and literally nowhere to go. Even though the Russian icebreaker, the Vladivostok, went to save them in early June, it wouldn't reach them until July, and so they were stranded there for nearly 2 months. The ship that was stuck was the Mikhail Somov, built in 1975 as a Russian research vessel. After spending all summer in the ice, the Vladivostok finally reached it, broke enough ice for the ship to get out, and everyone was saved. This was over 50 years ago, and there hasn't been quite this dramatic of an Antarctic rescue since then. The Octavius. The Octavius is by far one of the creepiest ghost ships to ever drift across the 7 seas. This story begins in 1761, when the Octavius was docked at a port in London. It was loaded with cargo destined for China, then set sail with a full crew. The ship arrived in China, unloaded its cargo, and set sail back to British shores. The issue is that the captain didn't seem to be thinking straight. The weather was so unbelievably warm in China that he thought they would make better time if they went through the Northwest Passage. At the time, this was a voyage that had never been accomplished, and what the captain didn't realize was that the warmth in China held absolutely no bearing on the temperature or weather conditions near the Arctic Circle. Nobody saw the Octavius again until 1775. A whaling ship by the name Herald spotted the beaten-up vessel drifting off the coast of Greenland. The whalers searched the ship for any possible survivors, but didn't find any. The deck was empty, and the whole place looked deserted. At least that was until they went down below. The entire 28-man crew was discovered frozen and dead in their quarters. And in the captain's cabin, the captain still sat at his great desk, one pen in his hand, and the logbook flattened in front of him. Everyone appeared to have been frozen suddenly, within a matter of just seconds. It was such a ghoulish sight that the whalers grabbed the logbook and ran away. The last recorded position in the book placed the Octavius 250 miles north of Barrow, Alaska. They had clearly gotten stuck and frozen in the ice. But even more mysterious is that after the whalers left, nobody ever saw the Octavius again. World War I mystery shipwreck. A fascinating Royal Navy ship was just discovered sunken off the western coast of Scotland. This ship has been missing ever since the days of World War I. Marine archaeologists just found it by using sonar technology. The vessel is called the HMS Jason, and it was a mine-sweeping gunboat for the Royal Navy, but it sank after it missed one of the mines it was supposed to be sweeping, took a major explosion to its hull, and was ripped apart. Of the ship's 91 crew members, 30 were lost in the tragedy on April 3, 1917. The entire boat went down in less than 5 minutes. And even though the location of the wreckage has been known for decades, a seabed survey in 2011 found no trace of it. It wasn't until Kevin Heath with Sula Diving and his team took it upon themselves to really track this ship down that they finally found it after 5 years. It's sitting about 305 feet deep next to a large rock. So covered in marine life, it hardly looks like a boat anymore. Santo Cristo de Burgos. In the year 1693, a ship set sail from the Philippines filled to the brim with silk and beeswax. Its destination was Mexico. However, the Spanish galleon, called the Santo Cristo de Burgos, was never seen by anyone again. It mysteriously vanished, and its soggy, decaying timbers were only recently discovered off the northern coast of Oregon. It was just a few weeks ago that the remains of this mysterious ship were taken out from sea caves near Manzanita, but they are hardly even that. The only thing the researchers found were long pieces of wood that had probably been part of the ship's hull. But to any ordinary person walking along the beach, they would just think these were giant chunks of driftwood. Until now, very few Manila galleon shipwrecks have been found due to the danger of the Pacific currents. The rest of this ship is still hidden somewhere offshore, sunk beneath the waves with its rich cargo still waiting to be delivered. Most historians believe the ship probably took a wrong turn on its way to Mexico, wound up off the Oregon coast, and broke itself against the craggy coastline. People in Oregon have been finding chunks of beeswax on the beach for years. Beeswax was actually one of the biggest trade commodities for Spain's colonies. Beeswax candles were needed for light, and of course, Catholic services, which were used to gradually convert the native people into obedient Christian citizens. The Mary Celeste. When it comes to spooky ghost ships, the Mary Celeste is the big one, up there with the Flying Dutchman. She was spotted 400 miles east of the Azores on December 5, 1872. The British crew of the Dei Gratia found the Mary Celeste adrift 8 days after she had left New York City. The Mary Celeste was supposed to have already arrived in Genoa, Italy. The captain of the Dei Gratia was extremely worried for the safety of the crew, and so he boarded the Mary Celeste to investigate. What he found has been an intriguing mystery for 150 years. There was not a single crew member on board the ship, and yet all their belongings were there. The cargo of industrial alcohol was still intact, and there was enough food and water to last another 6 months. To this day, we have no idea what happened between New York City and the Azores. There was no sign of a struggle, only a single lifeboat was missing, and the ship was fully operational. There was no reason for anyone to leave, never mind to leave without taking their clothing or enough food. And why would they pile onto a tiny lifeboat when they could have taken multiple lifeboats? Some say mutiny, some say pirates, and some even say those sailors were beamed aboard an alien spaceship. It's shout-out time! I want to say a big thank you to Becca Buckner and Axel Herrera for supporting this channel. Thanks, guys! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about haunted shipwrecks and ghost stories. The Gloucester. The Gloucester was one of the most famous ships in the 17th century, but 340 years ago, on one fateful day, this royal ship sank off the English coast while carrying James Stewart, who would go on to become the King of England. The sinking of the ship was surprisingly dramatic. The boat hit a sandbank on May 6, 1682, after James Stewart, who had been the Lord High Admiral, got into an argument with the captain over control of the ship. This argument caused them to run aground, which then resulted in the deaths of hundreds of crew members. James Stewart only survived by the hair on his chin, after he waited until the very last moment to abandon ship. The Gloucester was finally discovered in 2007 in the exact same place it sank. It was still stuck in the sand, with most of its hull submerged in the sediment and a massive split down its keel. The bell of the ship was recovered immediately, an artifact made back in 1681. And since then, multiple expeditions have gone down to investigate the creepy remains of what was once the most famous ship in all of Britain. The SS Baychimo. The SS Baychimo was the unsinkable ghost ship. It was built by the Swedish company Lindholmens and first set sail in 1914. It was a beast of a vessel, with a giant steel hull 230 feet long and powered by a triple steam engine. The ship was originally used as a trading vessel for journeys through the Baltic Sea, mainly sailing between Hamburg and Sweden. Then, after the First World War, she was given to the British government as part of Germany's reparations. The ship went into the service of the Hudson's Bay Company in 1921 and made trips between Britain and Canada, mostly collecting fur pelts. It was in 1931 when the Baychimo got trapped in a surprise blizzard off the northern coast of Alaska. The ship became stuck in the ice, the crew was forced to abandon ship, and they set up camp near the town of Barrow for the winter. In November of that same year, the ship vanished. Somehow, it had gotten itself free of the ice and drifted nearly 100 miles south. The vessel was written off, but it was a little premature. The ship turned out to still be in fantastic shape. It was spotted almost 500 miles east later that year, and the year after seen again floating near the shores of Alaska. In the 4 decades that followed, numerous sightings of the Baychimo were reported all around the Arctic. Explorers would even board the ship, look around, and then leave her to drift. The final sighting came in 1969, approximately 38 years after she was first abandoned. Since then, nobody knows what became of the Baychimo. Maybe you've seen it? The Zabello. Italy was recently hit by their worst drought in 70 years. The lack of rain continued to wreak havoc on the European country, and it also did something surprising. It revealed the ghostly wreckage of the Zabello, a huge barge that was used for transporting wood during World War II. It sank in 1943 in the River Po, a gigantic river which goes all the way from the Cottian Alps to the Adriatic Sea. The ship has actually been visible for the last few years. It was only now that the drought completely decimated the water levels that the whole thing became exposed. Northern Italy went without rain for 110 days, while snowfall dropped by 70%. While the entire ship has been exposed, it's not quite as exciting as it could be. The barge is totally broken, with very little left to the imagination. To be honest, it looks more sad than it does haunted. Stranded at sea. In a bizarre twist of events, a boat was abandoned in 2017 with the crew still on board. It happened when a shipping company in the United Arab Emirates ran into some financial issues. They were forced to abandon their oil tanker off the coast of Dubai, while leaving the crew stranded at sea. According to CBC News, the crew was stuck without being paid and with no way home. Believe it or not, those men remained on the ship for over 3 years. They had no money, no way to get themselves back to their own country, and were left sitting in this giant oil tanker like a bunch of modern-day castaways. One of these stranded crew members was a man named Ne Win from Myanmar. He had been hired to work as the chief engineer on the MT Iba. He started working on the tanker like much of the crew in 2017, just before Alco Shipping Services ordered them to anchor 8 miles off the coast of Dubai. By 2018, that company had been blacklisted by the Indian government, And later that year, they ceased all communication with the crew on board. Months turned into years, and Naywin and the rest of the crew were still stuck on that boat. It wasn't until 2021 that a storm broke the anchor and pushed the boat onto a public beach in Al-Quwain. That was when the crew came on shore for the first time in 3.5 years. Forced to do something, the company finally agreed to accept responsibility and pay about 70% of the unpaid wages to the workers. Still, they had been forced to live in unimaginable conditions on a forsaken ghost ship only 8 miles from civilization. The HMS Resolute. In 1845, Captain John Franklin left England with 2 ships in search of the Northwest Passage, the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror. The vessels weren't found until 2014, and the crew was never seen alive again. They got stuck in the ice and everyone died. In the years following, many ships went searching for the missing seamen and their boats, but they had no luck. One of the biggest search operations was in 1852. The HMS Resolute was among these ships, originally a merchant ship that had been refitted for Arctic exploration. It was part of a 5-ship squadron that left England and went into the Canadian Arctic looking for John Franklin's doomed expedition. Even though the Resolute didn't find Franklin's crew, she did find a different vessel that had gotten stuck in the ice. 3 years earlier, the HMS Investigator had also gone in search of the lost expedition and gotten stuck. In fact, the HMS Resolute got stuck too, as did 2 other ships on the expedition. The Resolute was abandoned, and the survivors never returned to collect it, and the ship managed to free itself from the ice and then drift away. She was discovered years later in 1855, over 1,200 miles from where she had originally gotten stuck. Captain James Buddington split his crew in half and sailed the ghost ship to Connecticut. It went on to serve in the British Navy until being retired and demolished in 1879. But when it was destroyed, the British government used its timbers to create a pair of desks. One of these was presented to President Rutherford Hayes in 1880 and is still sitting in the Oval Office to this very day. Adrift for 9 years. A ship that went missing in 2009 in the Pacific Ocean randomly appeared in the Indian Ocean 9 years later. It was last seen floating off the coast of Taiwan, but there was nobody on it, and nobody seemed to take responsibility for it. So it was just left alone to drift through the ocean. The ship, named Samratulangi PB 1600, was then seen nearly a decade later just off the coast of Myanmar. It had struck a sandbar and gotten stuck. Local fishermen boarded the ghost ship but couldn't find anyone. When the officials came to inspect the ship, they had no idea where it had come from. There was no crew, no cargo, and no evidence of what happened. We still don't know where the ship originally came from. Some reports claim the ship was on its way to be dismantled in Bangladesh when it accidentally got separated and then started drifting. But that's as far as the records go. The Lagarflot. In the year 1345, a mystery began in the lake town of Egilsstadir in Iceland. Locals witnessed a monster in the waters of Lake Lagarflot. They described this monster as a gigantic sea serpent, and it became known as the Lagarflot serpent. It was recorded in medieval scripts in 1589 that the monster was said to have raised its body so high above the water that a ship could have passed underneath. It appeared once again in the 17th century in Icelandic chronicles. The monster was witnessed between 1749 and 1750, discussed in the media in the 20th and 21st century, and even recorded on video in 2012. The mysterious lake worm has been witnessed repeatedly for about 700 years. People have described it as a gigantic worm slithering through the lake. Some have called it a gigantic water slug, and nobody has any idea what in the world it actually is. We know that the lake itself is fed by glacial waters. It's a massive body of water that's below sea level, and the worm is supposedly about 40 feet long. It's even been seen outside the water, coiled like a serpent in the shade of some trees. This thing is basically the Loch Ness Monster of Iceland, and with just as many sightings. In 1963, the head of the Icelandic National Forest Service claimed to see the beast, and it was witnessed again in 1998 by a teacher and her entire class of students. In 1983, Contractors laying a telephone cable found that their equipment had been broken by an unidentified creature, and some claim it was the giant serpent. Lost underwater city. Divers came across a group of circular columns and what appeared to be paved flooring off the shores of the Greek island Zakynthos. They believed at the time, in 2016, that they had come across a lost underwater city, a kind of Atlantis situation just off the coast of Greece. The columns looked like they had been shaped by human hands, and the floors were so flat and smooth they looked like the floors of temples or some other ancient buildings. This became an instant mystery and an international sensation. Nobody had any idea what this lost city was, who may have built it, or how old it was. Sadly, the mystery came to a grinding halt when scientists from the University of East Anglia came up with their own solution. According to Professor Julian Andrews, this was no lost city at all, but a geological phenomenon. Instead of archaeological remains such as pottery, the divers had simply come across structures made of hard minerals. These are called concretions, the result of faults underneath the surface releasing gases from deep within the earth. When the gases are released, they cause a change in chemistry of the sea sediment, and it creates a kind of natural cement structure. Even though the circular structures may look like the columns of a sunken temple, they are really just fancy rocks. The Octavius. The Octavius set sail from England in 1761 on its way to the Far East. This was a long and hard journey to make, and not many captains could steer their ships all the way around the world to India. And so, the captain of the Octavius wanted to prove his skill and decided he would try the Northwest Passage on the return trip home. Unfortunately for everyone on board, they were never seen alive again. The ship became stuck in the ice north of Alaska for 13 years. It was discovered on October 11, 1775 by a whaling ship called the Herald. It was found floating west of Greenland, and the entire crew of 28 was frozen and dead below deck, perfectly preserved like human icicles. Unfortunately, we don't actually know if any of this is true. The story of Octavius is a marine legend. The captain's body was supposedly discovered at the table in his cabin, with his pen frozen in his hand. He had frozen to death still trying to write in his captain's log. The last entry was from November of 1762, which indicated the ship had been frozen for 13 years. There aren't any legitimate historical records of the ship ever existing aside from the anecdotes and legends. After the whaling ship departed, the Octavius was never seen again. Some say it's still floating across the seas to this very day as a spooky ghost ship. Corpse ships in Japan. In 2015, Japan was having trouble with ghost ships washing up on its shores. Over a span of 2 months, 12 wooden boats were discovered adrift off the coast of Japan, carrying with them a disturbing cargo. Between the 12 wooden boats, Japanese authorities discovered the bodies of at least 22 people. These bodies weren't freshly dead either, but were already partially skeletonized. 2 of the bodies didn't have their heads. One boat contained 6 skulls for some reason, and all the corpses were vigorously decomposed. They appeared to have been dead and adrift at sea for a very long time, and it wasn't immediately clear where in the world they had come from. The Coast Guard in Japan immediately launched an investigation trying to unravel the mystery of the ghost boats. And while they weren't able to verify 100% where they had started their journey, they did make some educated guesses. The Japanese authorities believed that the boats came from North Korea and that they were carrying desperate North Korean defectors trying to flee the country. Sadly, this became less of a ghoulish mystery and more of a tale of tragedy. One of the boats had scraps of cloth that looked like a North Korean flag, which helped put the pieces together. It appears that the people in the boats fled North Korea by sea, only to get lost in the open ocean with no food or water. The people all perished inside the boats, and their skin literally fell off their bones. Later, their bones were bleached by the sun, before the tide finally brought them to the Japanese coast. The USS Maine. On the night of February 15, 1898, the U.S. battleship Maine was secured off the coast of Cuba. It exploded for an unknown reason that very night, filling the dark sky with fire and tossing dead and wounded sailors like ragdolls into the waters of Havana Harbor. The explosion caused a political catastrophe between the United States and Spain, since they had already been disputing Cuba as the island nation struggled for independence. Shortly after the explosion, the Spanish-American War began. But that's another story altogether. What we want to know is what sank the USS Maine. Over 100 years later, we still don't know. Some experts say it was an underwater mine, some say an accident on board, and some even say a primitive torpedo. There is even a crazy conspiracy theory that says newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst sabotaged the ship. His goal was to force Spain and America to go to war, and that way he could sell more newspapers. The reality is there is no way to solve the mystery all these years later, and we'll probably never know. The history books claim it was Spain's fault, that they had torn a hole in the bottom of the ship on purpose. But according to a study in 1976, the damage was self-inflicted. The study claimed it was a coal fire in the belly of the ship that ignited stacks of gunpowder, an accident that started a war. We may never know for sure exactly what happened to the USS Maine, since the only contributing evidence we have today is the previous studies and 100-year-old photographs. The legendary Kraken. In 2014, Captain John Bennett's crew dragged an unbelievable creature into their fishing boat. They had been fishing in the remote Ross Sea of Antarctica, and nobody had been expecting to reel in a literal monster. And yet, that was exactly what they found. They hauled a squid into the boat that weighed over 770 pounds, a biblical sea monster which was captured from over 1 mile below the surface. The marine monster was actually a colossal squid, which was about the length of a small bus. The fishermen brought the specimen to shore, handed it over to scientists, and they kept it frozen for 8 months while doing studies. One of the squid scientists involved, Kat Bolstad, said it was an unprecedented opportunity to examine a colossal squid. After all, scientists don't know that much about these aquatic animals. Colossal squid are so big and live so deep in the ocean, it's extremely rare that they are captured in fishermen's nets. But the real mystery is trying to figure out if it's the same colossal squid responsible for the ancient myths of the legendary Kraken. As you may know already, the Kraken first appeared in written history in the 13th century in Icelandic lore, but stories of the tentacled beast can be found much earlier and from all over the world. Scientists wonder if it was the colossal squid that gave birth to these legends, or if there was an even bigger squid that has since gone extinct. A squid so gargantuan, it really could have brought down entire fleets of ships. The road to Atlantis. Scientists in the Pacific Ocean have just discovered the road to Atlantis. Oceanographers doing scientific experiments aboard the EV Nautilus were looking at the floor of the ocean off the coast of Hawaii when they made the discovery in April of 2022. The particular area they were observing happens to be within a massive underwater volcanic mountain range. At a depth of 3,376 feet, near the top of the Nootka Seamount lies the mysterious road. Scientists could not believe their eyes. Even more amazing is that the discovery was made while the team of scientists was broadcasting their 24/7 live stream on YouTube. Everyone who was watching got to see the strangely uniform road of yellow stones come into view. But is this really the road to Atlantis? Or a road to some other ancient submerged city? That's a question that's hard to answer. Scientists say that only about 3% of this particular volcanic range underwater has been explored. This means there could technically be ruins somewhere. Its peaks rise to over 16,000 feet above the seabed, with the tallest summit a mere 200 feet beneath the surface. It's not that outrageous to think the sea level rose thousands of years ago, covering a city that had previously been on an island. However, the scientists were quick to point out that the road, even though it appears to be paved in yellow bricks, is almost certainly a geological formation. It looks like a road, and there is no way at the moment to prove it isn't, but the scientists doubt that it leads to a lost city. Crumbling shipwreck. Archaeologists discovered a mysterious shipwreck in 2013, buried at the bottom of a stream. But only recently did the researchers begin the long and arduous process of taking the boat apart piece by piece to solve its mystery. The issue is that the shipwreck is old, 1,300 years old to be exact. Its timbers are so fragile that the air itself will destroy them if they aren't sprayed with water every 30 minutes. The boat is currently under the protection of the French National Institute for Preventive Archaeological Research. They say the boat has been carbon dated to around 680 AD, to the Middle Ages. It was originally 40 feet long, and it could have been used to navigate large rivers and shallow coastal waters along France and the Atlantic. The mystery scientists are still trying to figure out who built the boat and what it had been used for. We don't know if it was built by the tribal people of the Franks while they were dominating much of Western Europe after the Roman Empire had fallen, but it does date back to around that time. It may have even just been an ordinary fishing boat. We just will never know for certain. The SS Waratah. Speaking of mysterious boats, let's check out the disappearance of the SS Waratah. This was a passenger and cargo steamship built back in 1908. Its purpose was to travel between Europe and Australia, bringing passengers and cargo across the open seas. But in July of 1909, this ship's second voyage, she vanished while somewhere off the coast of South Africa. She was between Durban and Cape Town when she simply evaporated into thin air, with 211 passengers, full of manned crew aboard. Over 100 years later, the mystery has never been solved, and the SS Waratah has never been found. Although it's still a mystery, there are definitely theories. Some say the ship was hit by a freak wave that sucked it into the ocean. Others say that because the Waratah was carrying a massive load of around 1,000 tons of lead and 300 tons of lead ore concentrate, the cargo destabilized the ship and it capsized. Another theory states that the Waratah was caught in a monstrous whirlpool. Fierce winds, raging ocean currents, and a deep ocean trench created a swirling drain of water to suck the ocean liner down into its dark and murky depths. Creepy fossilized brain. Scientists have discovered the mysterious fossil of a marine creature that lived over 500 million years ago. More specifically, they found the perfectly fossilized brain of this creature, a primitive form of prawn that had 3 eyes. Scientists say that thanks to its preserved brain and its complete central nervous system still visible in the fossil, they can now learn more about the origins of the creepiest things in the world, like insects and crustaceans. The creature's scientific name is Stanleycaris hirpex, and it had 2 dangling eyes on stalks with 1 gigantic eye in the middle. It also had spiked claws and lived during the Cambrian period, which was when life exploded in a serious way on the planet for the first time. Even though it was only a prawn, it was the apex predator of its time. The fossil was found in the Canadian Rocky Mountains, in a prehistoric graveyard called Burgess Shale. University of Toronto scientist Joseph Moisiuk says he and his team have been able to look at the visual processing centers of the creature's eyes and even see the traces of nerves going into its appendages. It truly was a disturbing life form, and yet it's only one example of what the oceans looked like approximately 506 million years ago. It was a primordial soup of insectoid-like monsters just like this one, all birthed from some cosmic nightmare. Thanks for watching! Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!